up to the Mishnah. We're continuing discussing the Shavuos Ha'edus and Shavuos HaPekadon. So Shavuos Ha'edus is where I'm asking you to testify on my behalf, and you swear that you have nothing to share with me, and whether it was done b'shegig or whether you did b'mezid, even deliberately, and you admitted later that you actually do have some testimony, you have to bring a carbon out of the Yerid. And it only happens if I ask you to swear on my behalf. So there has to be a teveya, somebody asking it from you. So we are up to the Mishnah here. That's why I'm giving them an aleph. And we said there's two ways of swearing. One is mushba ayidei atzmai, and one is mushba ayidei acher. One is that the Eidim themselves made the shavua, they swore they have no testimony. Or the other way is that let's say the plaintiff asks them to swear, and they say we have nothing to say for you, and he says mashbi ani aleichem, I'm making you swear that you don't have anything, and they answer amen. If they're quiet, we had before Rashi had a question, how do we treat that? So we're up to the Mishnah here. Mashbi ani aleichem. So the Mishnah continues here. Let's say different examples. I make you swear. The plaintiff turns around to these two potential witnesses and he says, I want you to swear if you won't come to the Bezdin and support me. This is what I want you to testify about. First of all, that I have my money is sitting by that person, Pekodin. I deposited some money. The Tzumas Yad, there's also some money there that I gave on loan. And the guzzle and stole from me. There's four different monies that I am dealing with that person, and including I'm accusing that person of stealing my money, and I'm accusing the person also of finding some money that belongs to me. And they go back and they say the following: Shvua, we swear. We're right in the Mishnah. We just started the Mishnah, so he makes them swear that there are four different things, that there's four different grounds and four different lots of money that I'm chasing. And they swear that they say the following: Shvua, we swear. We have nothing to say. So they only gave one shvua. It turned out to be that they swore false. So even though I spoke about four different kinds of monies, they only chayiv for one shvua. But I say to them, shvua she'ein anu yodim, we don't know sheyesh loch biyad ploni. If they swear, we have nothing to add and nothing to share with you, and we swear that we have no information that you happen to have money with that person, Pekodin, and they start nominating each allegation. Pekodin, money deposited; Tzumas Yad, money on loan; Begezel, stolen money; Vaveda, that he found one of your items. And turned out to be they lied, because they itemized each item separately, even though they put it together in one shvua. This is treated like four shvuas, and chayovin akol achas v'achas. So therefore, they're liable for every single one, as if it's four different averes. Mashbi, next case. Mashbi aleichem swears, im loy tavo, if you won't come, the idu and testify sheyesh li biyad pleni, that I have in the hand of that person pekodin. Deposit. In this case, a little bit different than the very first case. It's not that there are four different types of monies. We're talking about the same money. We're talking about money, but four different reasons or four different allegations. Here we're talking about there's one allegation that you have a pekodin, but different types of items I gave you as a pekodin. So, for example, you say to him, sorry, I just lost the place. Mashbin aleichem b'loy tova, you don't come to Ido and you'll testify sheyeshli, you have plenty that I have in that person's possession, pekodin, a deposit. So it's only talking about a deposit, but in that deposit there's chitin, wheat, tzayid, barley, kushmi, spelt, three different kinds of things. And their response is, shvua, we swear, we have nothing to say. So they didn't itemize the three things. They just say in response, we have nothing to share. Then they confessed and they lied, that they swore false. They committed one aveda, one carbon. But if they itemize the items, shvua, they swear, we don't know, we don't know that you have a deposit by that person, chitin, wheat, tzayid, and barley, kusmin, and spelt, then it's treated like three different vows, and you have to pay each for each one. Bring a carbon for each one. We're still in the middle of the Mishnah, and we're discussing Shavuos Ha'edus. So the Mishnah continues. So mashbi ani aleichem. Another third example. He says to them, I'm making you swear. I want you to swear for me. If you won't come to Bez and join me and testify, sheyeshli biyad pleni. And this is what my allegation is, that person owes me nezek. He owes me either for full damages or chati nezek. He owes me for half damages. Now, if you remember the Tezvov there in Baba Kama, we had an argument. Chati nezek would be a case like a tam, an animal the first three times when it gores, we say it's out of the ordinary, so you only pay a chatzi nezik. And we have an argument in Gemara, Rav Papa, Rav Huda B'Rei Yeshua. Rav Papa says that chatzi nezik is merely a knas. Whenever you don't pay the full amount that is due, it's a penalty. Rav Huda B'Rei Yeshua says it's a penalty. And Rav Papa says, no, it's mammon. The Torah just had Rachmanis, reduced it from, let's say, the full hezek to half hezek. But what you're paying now is not a penalty, but compensation. So we will soon see in the Gemara discuss which way our Mishnah goes with. Anyways, I'm accusing that person of retaining my money, either nezek or chati nezek or tashlume keiful. He owes me because he stole. He was a ganav. He has to pay me back double.
Can't eat that.
The principal and then double. Tashlume above chamisha. He has to pay. If he took a sheep or a cow and he sold it or he shechted it, if somebody can please mute themselves. If he shechted it, you pay a penalty of 4 or 5 times, depends if it's a cow or if it's a sheep. Or he says, Usha'anis each plani is biti. This person was ma'anis, raped my daughter, and therefore there's a sum that you have to pay. Or upita as biti, he seduced my daughter, and therefore there's a penalty that has to be paid. Ushahikani b'ni, or that my own son hit me, and therefore there's a penalty to be paid. We're talking about that the son hit him, but it didn't cause a wound and bleeding and all that, because then the son is chayiv misa, and we have a rule that kamle b'derabbanei, when you're chayiv misa, there's no money involved. This din of Shavuos Edus only applies if we learned before already, if it impacts financially on the person. Are you withholding the testimony? I'm going to lose out monetarily because we're talking about money and you can help me out. So there's only money here because the son, shikani b'ni, there's no misa here because there was no chabura. Or shechava b'chavera, or my friend hit me. So what does that have to do with anything? Or shehidlik as gedishi, he lit my granary. And when did they do that, my friend? Or when did they light my granary? B'yom kippurim, my silos on Yom Kippur. Now Yom Kippur, for doing that alone, you're chayiv kares. There's an argument we're having more exubis of lamed, whether do we say kam leber de rabba maneh when the death penalty is not in the court of law, but rather from Hashem kares. Rav Nechunya ben Akan is under the impression that kam leber de rabba maneh, so therefore there's no money involved there. But we follow the Chachamim that there's no kam leber de rabba maneh here. You still owe the money, and therefore the Eidim are withholding the testimony regarding these last two cases. They're harming me, and they're hurting me. And therefore, if they confess later, they're liable for being a carbon oil. Okay, so the Gemara, in the case of oinus and pitu, there's a amount, a knas that you pay $50, and so it seems if you prima facie that the Mishnah is discussing not only monetary cases but also penalty cases as well. For example, chati nezek, if you follow the view that's a knas, or oinus, somebody rapes a girl, or mefata, if somebody seduces a girl, there's a penalty of $50 that goes to the father. We'll come back to that. Says the Gemara, we have a question, and this is the very question the Gemara is going to deal with. Mashbia eide knas mahu. What happens? We know that the Eidim, Shavuos Edus is only dealing with monetary issues, and they're going to cause a monetary loss to the teveya, to the, let's say, plaintiff, and therefore, if they swore false, they have to be a carbon early. What about that? The loss that they are going to affect the teveya is only a penalty that the teveya is entitled to, and because they're withholding the testimony, the teveya won't receive that penalty. Is that considered a monetary thing or not? Now, just quickly a brief preamble. The din is that if the person who's liable for example, a ganif is caught, has to pay back the principal, and there's a penalty. They have to pay back double. Kefil. What happens? The Ganav steps forward and goes to the Beis, and he admits that he was a Ganav. So obviously he has to return the item or pay the principal, but he doesn't pay the penalty. Moide beknas pot. And why? We learn out from a pasuk Asher Yashion Elakim that only in Elakim, only a bezin has the ability to create an obligation of paying a knas, a penalty, because the penalty is not something that I took away from the person, and if I owe it to him, penalty is something that the Torah levied, and only a bezin has the right to levy that. So there's a big argument tonight. What happens, according to this one Amora, what happens if Moide Beknas v'achakach bo Edim? In other words, you came to Bezin on a Monday and you made it that you stole it. Tuesday, two Edim come into court and they say that this guy stole it. Do we say, well, he was made yesterday, he doesn't have to pay that double, that extra penalty? Or do we say, no, now that we have Edim, they do? And basically the question is, how do we understand Moide Beknas Potter? There's two ways of learning Pshat. One way of learning Pshat is Moed B'Knas Potter is the whole purpose of a penalty is that you should do tshuva. We don't want you to do this again. But if you came forward and you were contrite and you admitted to the bezin that you stole the money, then that is tshuva. What do I need to make a penalty? Why do I need to make it pay a penalty? So therefore, by you showing remorse, that is your penalty. That is your payment. So if Adim come tomorrow and say you stole it, so what? You already paid the penalty by being moed. So that opinion holds moed b'knas. The achakach bo Edim, you are potter. The other view is that no, the reason why Moide Beknas is potter is because you don't have the Bezin does not have the power, does not have the authority to levy a penalty if we don't have witnesses. It's the witnesses who levy the penalty. So if you come forward to Bezin and you admit it, the reason why you don't pay the penalty is not because you filled remorse or you did tshuva, nothing to do with that. It's because Bezin doesn't have the authority to place that levy on you. But if it's only the Adim, if the Adim come forward tomorrow, that's when the levy comes into place. Okay, so now the question is, because by Knas, you sort of have the ability to wiggle your way out of Knas by admitting it, and according to the view that says Moide Knas. The thing is that you are potter. That means there's a way that you can get out of paying. Then it's one step lower than mum. It's not like a knas. It's not like a non-monetary issue, but it's not exactly like a monetary issue. There's no way of getting out of it other than paying it. Here, there's another option. I can get out of it by going forward and being made. So it's a step lower. And the question is that considered a moment for Shavuos Eidus? So now that's the Gemara. Our question is, and we're going to go back to our Mishnah and see whether we can prove from our Mishnah one way or another. Says the Gemara, if it comes to Eidim about Knas, and I ask them to swear, and they swear falsely, what happens? So according to Rabbi Shimon, he is of the opinion that you can be made from today to tomorrow, but if Eidim come tomorrow, you have to pay it, which means that Knas is no different than Mammon. So, Leit to Boilach. There's no question. The Ahmad, he says, Yavo Adim, let the Adim come. He says, therefore, the Adim, if they come the following day, the following week, the following month, they'll make you pay. So if they withhold the testimony, they're hurting you monetarily. So, of course, they have to bring a carbon alleviated. Kita Bailach, my question is, according to the Rabbanon. Why? The Amri, they say, Moide Beknas. The Achakach Bo Adim Potter. They said that if Adim come afterwards, it's still Potter if you were made first, which means there's another option. Is not as strong as a monetary obligation because there is a way of getting out of it by coming to the bezin and being made. So therefore, how do we treat it? And now the question goes a step further. Rabbanan, the Hasim, those Rabbanan who hold that Moide Beknas is an option, and you are potter. Keman Svila, who would they hold like regarding the other argument that we learned in the last few days between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon Chachamim, and that is a single aid. In a case where a single aid comes forward and says Reuven owes Shimon $100, Reuven has to swear that he doesn't owe the money. If he refuses to swear, then he has to pay the money to Shimon. So the Eid Echa doesn't directly impact the money. It's more like what do you call it? It's a goyrim. The Eid Echad will be a cause. If Reuven doesn't swear, cannot swear, whatever, then Reuven has to pay. So the Eid Echad caused it to happen. It wasn't direct. And we had an argument between Rabbi Elazar, the same Rabbi Elazar and Shimon, but it's a different argument, totally unrelated. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, whether Goyim Lemammon is considered as if it's direct or not. So the Gemara says like this: what would these rabbanon who hold that Maida b'Knas is potter if they even they didn't come afterwards? What would they hold regarding Goydon Lamaman? Kimansil, who do they hold like? Elam Kalazam Shimon the Hochlak over here. Hakamad, he said, Dobra Goydon Lamaman Kimamadami. Doesn't he say that Dobra Goydon Lamaman is Kimamadami? And therefore, this knas, the fact is, right now he wasn't made yet, and because he wasn't made yet, and if Aiden come tomorrow, he would have to pay. So it could result into money. That's a davar going moment. Then even the Rabbanan would say, well, if these Adim withhold the testimony, they're affecting him monetarily, at least indirectly, and that's enough. El Rabbanon, the Hocha, but our question is according to the view of the Rabbanon here. So the Rabbanon over there that hold Meiva Kanas Edim Potter, there's an option of getting out of it. The Rabbanon over here say that if you're only a cause, it's not grounds to make the Edim pay the carbon oil of the Yodid. So the Ami how do we treat this? Do we say the fact is he wasn't made yet? So do we say Kiv and Ilamoidim, since if he would have come forward and then made the bezin, he would be potter. Therefore, it's a step lower than a monetary chiv. So lav kafle. So he's not really, when they withholding the testimony, they're not really holding back testimony regarding dini mamnus. They're holding back testimony from a possible from a knas, which could be the guy can get out of it. So it's only if if he's not made, then he has to pay. So therefore, they're a step removed. They're like a goyrim. Or do we say this is not the same thing? The fact is the guy wasn't made, so they're directly making him pay. How do we view knas? So we're going to bring a few cases, including our Mishnah, to see whether we can whether we can glean from any of these cases that even by knas we would say that the Eidim withholding the testimony and they lied, they swore false, and then they confess they have to bring a carbon. What's the story? Tashma coming here. We learned Mashbi and Elechem, I make it swear im loy tavoyum. If you don't come, to duni and testify on behalf, she yeshli plenty nezik v'chatzi nezik. Either he owes me for a full damage or a half a damage. Now, what's a half a damage? Generally speaking, half a damage is chatzi nezik is a keren. It's an abnormal. The animal gored the first 3 times you pay chatzi nezik. Well, chatzi nezik, chatzi nezik. The ultimate halacha is that it's only a knas, and we see that if the Eidim withheld the testimony, they get penalized. Says the Gemara, how do you know? Yeah. Well, Chati Nezik Knasuhu, and Chati Nezik is Knas, so therefore maybe that isn't that a proof that Knas as well, Eidim hold back money, they hold it back. It's the Chayib Kamna. Says the Gemara, who said? Maybe Kamandama Palganiska Mamoina. Maybe our Mishnah holds like the view that Palganiska is Mammon, nothing to do with Knas. Says, okay, that would make sense. The one who holds a Palganiska is happy to learn an anonymous Mishnah siding with him. But Yeshua said that it's a Knas. He's not going to learn the Mishnah is talking about Mammon. Chatzi Nezik is Mammon. So, at least according to him, we can prove clearly from our Mishnah that Knas is also considered a monetary thing regarding Shavuos Daf. That you want to know. We did learn in the beginning of Abakam that the Patzi Nezek Tradis, that when an animal walks normally and rocks go flying out, that's called Tradis. And that's not Keren. Keren is that the animal behaves abnormally, goes out of its way to gore and hurt things. This animal's walking and rocks go flying. This is perfectly normal. That falls under the category of regel. And regel, normally you pay a full nezek. And regel, normally you are potter exempt in the Shus Harabim. Shem regel exempt in the Shus Harabim. Because it says has to be someone else's field, not Shus Harabim. But we have Hilchos of Moshe Sinai that walking and rocks go flying in the Shus Harabim you pay. Hilchos b'chatzi nezek traders. We're talking about that it's chatzi nezek of pebbles, and that pebbles you only pay half a nezek. It's halacha Moshe Sinai. It's mammon, and you only pay a half a nezek. So therefore, that's what our Mishnah is talking about, and has nothing to do with the knas and so on. Says the Gemara, no proof one way or another. Okay, Tashma coming here. Let's continue reading down the Mishnah. Tashlume Kaiful. It says Tashlume Kaiful. That Kaiful definitely is knas, and we see here that you bring if you lie, you bring karma obligated. Says the Gemara, no, that proves nothing. Mishum karna. The reason why the Eidim are being penalized, they have to bring that carbon, is because included in the double portion is also the principal. And the principal is definitely Mammon. And he lied about that. So he went, okay, what about Tashlumi Dal Behay? If you steal a cow or a sheep, you pay 4 or 5 times, and you shecht it or sell it. Think about the same thing. The carbon that we make the Adam bring is because of the keta, not because of the penalty. Doesn't prove one way or another. Says, okay, what about the next case in the Mishnah? She'onas ish pleni upita is biti. This person here, raped or seduced this girl, and there's a knas of $50. So let's put him out a knas. And we have the agent withhold, they know the testimony, they withhold it, they have to bring a carbon agent when they later admit that they lied. Says Gemara, who said that we're talking about the actual penalty? There are other payments as well. There's boishes, there's the humiliation and the shame, and we know that the rule of knas is whenever the Torah gives a fixed amount, let's say $30 if you heard an evet, whenever the Torah gives a fixed amount and we don't really care the value of this evet, that's called a knas. It's a universal penalty for everybody. But if we go, it's relative, it's very subjective. Let's see who this person is, depending, is he a chashuv person, not a chashuv person, and that's how much you have to pay. That's called mammon. So boishes is something which depends on the person. So that's purely mammon. Right? Depends who the person is doing the shaming and who the person is who's being humiliated. And pagam is that now this girl is no longer a virgin, and therefore the value of her ksuba changes from a virgin to a non-virgin. That's a monetary cost from 200 down to 100. And therefore, and yet it seems from the Mishnah here, and that's so when our Mishnah says that the Eidim, they withheld the testimony and they lied after being promoted, it's talking about because we're focusing on the monetary side of it, not on the penalty side of it. So it proves nothing. Says the Gemara, so my Kamash, what are you telling us? All of these cases in our Mishnah are Mammon, is it Aisha? So what's the Chiddush here? So what's the Chiddush in our Mishnah? Says the Gemara. So why does the Mishnah have to give so many examples if they're all exactly the same? They're all identical. All money matters. And once the principle is the same, the Eidim withhold the testimony, and they could have helped the person out. Now they're hurting him, and they lied and they swore false. They got to bring carbon of the aided. Why bring so many examples? There's a chiddush in each category. So the Gemara, each one is teaching us something new, and then once you bring one thing new, we bring already a few other examples as well. Reisha chad kamash, you know what the Reisha is coming to teach you? The chatzi nezek tzreides is mamanu. That you should know, our Mishnah holds that only money matters. You pay kamla, and I want you to know that chatzi nezek tzreides is, even though it's only chatzi nezek, you should know that it's money, because generally the rule is if you're not paying the full compensation, then it falls under the category of knas. But I want you to know that chatzi nezek trader, these pebbles that go flying from the animal's foot, even though you're only paying half a nezek, it's really mammon. And Sefer Chodesh Mash, they also teach you one thing, and what's that? Shehidlik as gedisha be'kippurim. If you lit the silo, the granary on Yom Kippur, because you would have thought. We learned Rav Nechunya ben Akana's opinion, who says that if you do this on Yom Kippur, since this person is chayiv koros b'dei shemayim for what he did, he's exonerated from paying money because kamle b'drabane. So then, in that case over there's no money issue here at all, and the eidim wouldn't be caught out. So that it wouldn't have to pay over the Yerid. So he's coming to the Mishnah telling you the halach is not like Rav Nechunya ben Akana, and we hold there's no kamle b'drabane b'koros, and therefore he would have to pay the money, and the eidim withhold the testimony, they're hurting him monetarily. Would treat Yom Kippur like Shabbos. And he equated Yom Kippur to Shabbos. No, as he said, there's no difference why you get killed, whether it's in the hands of a court of law or whether it's b'dei shemayim. You don't pay the money. In Ma Shabbos chulu, and we'll come and tell you differently. Okay, the Gemara tries to prove elsewhere. Toshma coming here. I'm going to make it swear. If you don't come and testify, that this particular person spread false rumors about my story. He said he married my daughter, and he says there I didn't find any psulim because I'm accusing her of committing adultery while we were engaged. And what happened was he said, if you this guy went to another bezin, and said, and before I had a chance, the father was saying, before I had a chance to question him and to take him to the Torah for making up a story, and to demand my, by rape, by this case, there's $100 knas, and before I had a chance to collect my $100 knas, he left. So I'm now standing in another bezin, and I'm asking these two Eidim come forward and help me out. So we're talking about a knas, and but if the guy himself, the person who came along and said, he has a penalty of $100. If he went to another bezin and he admitted, he said, look, this is what happened. I confess that I lied, and Moed Miknas is potter. And is potter, and according to this brisa, even if witnesses come the following day, knows Moed Miknas, he is potter. So we see from here, we're talking about as a knas. We're talking about there's a knas over here, and and we're talking about a knas over here, and we're talking about Eidim Shavuos Eidus, that they're liable. Says the Gemara, no, who told you that if he admitted another bezin and Eidim come afterwards, he's potter? It's talking about he came to another bezin, he admitted this is what happened, and the bezin doesn't have the authority to levy a knas on him, because this brisa follows Rabbi Elazar but Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, who says that if Eidim come afterwards, you do have to pay because it's a monetary thing. It's not knas. He says that Moed Miknas potter is not because it's not an option of paying by admitting, because it's a question of Eidim. Eidim are only ones who have the authority to levy this knas. So therefore, this kind, according to Rabbi Shimon, we already established before, it's no different than any other case of money, and the Eidim who withhold the testimony are hurting the father of this girl, let's say, and they'll have to pay a criminal of Eidim. Eidim can come tomorrow and testify. So if these Eidim are holding back the Eidim, they're actually hurting him. So the Gemara, aim of Sefer, look in the Sefer of the Brisa, it says, it seems from the Brisa, it says, if he was made on his own, potter. It seems like from the Brisa what? That if he's made on only potter, from paying the money, which sounds like even the Eidim come afterwards, he's potter, which also the Rabbanan. And that follows the view of the Rabbanan that says that what? That once you admit it, you're potter. How can it be the beginning of the Brisa of Elazar Rav Shimon, and the end of the Brisa is Rabbanan? Says the Gemara, you're right. Kula Rabbi Elazar but Rav Shimon. The entire Brisa is Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon. And this is what we say. You know, when we say that if you are murdered, if this man who's married to this woman and made all these allegations comes forward to another bezin and he's murdered, that he's murdered, you know when he's potter? There were no witnesses. When he came on his own, and therefore, if he came, there's no witnesses, but there were witnesses, and even according to the Brisa, even if they came afterwards, he would have to pay, and therefore, that's why if you're holding back the testimony, you're hurting him monetarily. So we have no proof one way or another. The conclusion we made is we have no proof one way or another whether Eidei Knas is the din of oil obligated or not. Because we can interpret the Mishnah is talking about matters of money, not about knas. Next Mishnah. So the Mishnah, we're still talking about Shavuos Eidus before we move on to Shavuos Abakadon. Now, just quickly, if you remember by Shavuos Eidus as well, that Shavuos Eidus only applies to people that are kosher and qualified to be witnesses. And if if it's about a relative, it doesn't work. There has to be people who are qualified to be witnesses. And also we said by Shavuos Eidus, there's even b'mezid, you still bring a carbon oil of a. And if it's a shogeg combined with a mezid, like for example, he didn't know there was a carbon involved there. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he didn't know there was a carbon involved, or according to some, he didn't even know if there was an aver involved. Why should I get involved? I have to get mixed into this person, life. I don't want to go to court. So that's like I didn't realize it was also, but they knew what they were doing. If it's a total shogeg, he forgot that he actually had testimony to share. That's a different story altogether. That we treat like an oinus in your potter. Okay, so Mashbi, why I'm telling you this because it's relevant to Gemara later on. Mashbi ani aleichem, I want to make you swear, even like to come and testify ani kohen. I want you to come and testify that I'm a kohen. Now, there's no monetary side of it. Remember, the point we're trying to bring out here is that the din of Shavuos Ha'edus is only when you're hurting the Teveya monetarily. By you withholding your testimony, they lose out. That person loses out. He doesn't have your support. So if he says, I want you to swear that I'm a Kohen, or Shani Levi, that I'm a Levi, or She'eni Ben Grusha, I don't want people to accuse me that my mother was a Grusha, and therefore I'm a divorcee, and my father was a Kohen, therefore I'm a Chol. Or She'eni Ben Chalutza, or that my mother was a Chalutza, that that her husband died, and instead of marrying her brother-in-law, she got a Chalitza, which a Kohen with the Rabban is not allowed, according to most opinions, with the Rabban is not allowed to marry, therefore I'm a Chol. I want you to testify on my behalf, support me. Or She'ish Pliny Kohen, I want you to testify that that person is a Kohen. Or She'ish Pliny Levi, or that person is a Levi. She'ein Ben Grusha Mechlutza. Instead of talking about me, I want you to talk about somebody else. And a very important point, which we're going to bring up, is that the din of Shavuos Ha'edus is only the very person that needs that testimony is the one who asks you for it, not on behalf of somebody else. So here we have another issue here that it's not even doing for himself, it's doing for somebody else. Plus, it's not a monetary issue. So or she'onas ish plainly as bitoy, that person went ahead and it was ma'anis. There's two ways of learning pshat in the Mishnah here. Ma'anis someone else's daughter, or ma'anis his own daughter. Or pita as bitoy, or he seduced someone else's daughter, or his own daughter. These are all cases where there's no monetary thing. Now, why is there no monetary things? Because either because it's somebody else's, or because there's kamlim with the rabbin involved there. In these cases of incest, the father, his own daughter, there's a chiv of mis over here, and therefore there's no monetary issue here. Or shechava bibni, my son actually hurt me, and he's chayv, and there was a chabura, and for that he's chayiv misa. And or he did it to me, or or my friend was chayvel me, so, and or shehidli kdishi, but both happen on Shabbos. Now, if he did it on Shabbos, one of the third Mamloch is making a chabura, so he's chayiv misa. Come to the rabbinate, you don't pay money. In all of these cases, the witnesses want to withhold the testimony, they're not hurting you monetarily, and therefore they don't bring a criminal yidin. Says the Gemara, time, but the only reason is the each playing a koyi and each playing a Levi. Sounds like from here that even though we're talking about a third party, it's not directly the Teveya who is demanding it, it's a third party. It would have worked had it not been for the fact that there's no money involved. But that's not true, is it? Hamana leplani biaplani. But if, let's say if I have said, you owe that person money. I want you to swear and help that person out. Sounds like mechayav will be chayiv. How can that be? Haktani seifa. We learn the Mishnah later on. Ad sheyish me'u mepi hativeya. The whole din of Shavuos Ha'edus only applies if they heard it directly from the plaintiff. Omar Shmuel says, we're talking about over here, the Ba Bahashah. We're talking about over here is that he had like a power of attorney. And because he had a power of attorney, the debt has been transferred to this person who's demanding a teveya. So he has every right to be teveya. And in this case, if he's a teveya, he can actually ask for the money, and it would be Shavuos Ha'edus. And the only reason why there isn't is because there's no money involved. Kohen, Levi, that doesn't apply to money. Says the Gemara, there's no money there. Says the Gemara, how could that be? How could we have been talking about there's a power of attorney? Didn't Hedoi say, like Kasvin and Urchata Metaltli, you don't write a power of attorney on Metaltlin, only on property, something that's visible, because Metaltlin maybe it's not visible, and could be the metalton is already gone somewhere else, and if it doesn't look authentic, so power of attorney is only on karka that everybody can see it's there. Says Marhani Mili, when we say that law that you shouldn't write a power of attorney on metalton, hecha de kafre. If there's a dispute and that other person is denying it, so if it's metalton, how can I give you a power of attorney over these metalton? It could be that not even my metalton. It could be that, and it could be they don't even exist anymore. It doesn't look credible. But on karka, everybody can see the karka is right there. And therefore, I'm giving you over all my rights to the karka to represent me. That's different. So even metalton, if nobody's denying it, we can write. We can write him over. So he received the power of attorney, and nobody was denying it before anything happened. And now he's saying, I want you to go to that person. So if it's a Kohen or Levi, there's no dinner shvus ha'edus because there's no monetary impact. But if it will be money, yes, he can. Says the Gemara. So he told me the case we did.
There is a monetary implication. It's not. It's an
That's
indirect.
all indirect. Truma Mises and all that is all indirect. Let's say it has to be direct. So here we're talking about it. Here he gave him a power of attorney way before we knew there was a dispute. We didn't hear anything otherwise. So then you can give a power of attorney. We had a number of cases. Tell about we learned. Menayin, how do you know? How do you know? Now we have a number of answers in Maria. How do you know that it's limited? This dinner shvus edus and a carbon earlier is limited only to monetary issues, monetary disputes. So we have a number of Tanaim, each one giving their own a view. Rabbi Lezer says Nemakan. It says over here oyin. Interesting expression. Oyin means there's a number of times in the very same pasuk where it uses the word oy or, and because it says it more than once, or it's coming to add something. So because there's oyin and we're going to make a gzer shabbat, and it says over here that if regarding shvus edus, it says over here, oy ra, oy yada. These witnesses either saw or they knew. It says twice oy, and we find the nemalahal, and it says also regarding a shvuas pekadon. So we're going to equate shvuas edus to shvuas pekadon, which before we did already anyway. And it says there again, it says that Oy betzumis yad, either was alone and he swore false about it, Oy begezel, Oy yashik. So it says a bunch of Oys. So we're going to compare Shavuos Edus to Shavuos Pekadon. And what do we know? Malahala, what's it talking about the case of Shavuos Pekadon? We're disputing money. Whether I deposited by you, I didn't. Whether I lent you money, I didn't. Whether you stole, you didn't. So ain't about my money. He's Afghan. So too over here, when it comes to the Edus, ain't about my money matters. So they want to ask a question. How do you know? What about there's another passage when it talks about murder? It says there also oyin, a number of oyin. It says oy hishlich olav. It says you tossed on him. You prepared and he died. Nobody hated him and therefore you ambushed him. Oy be'eva hiko. You did it with enmity. So it says over there a number of oys as well, and there's nothing to do with money. Talking about murder. So how do you know that to compare it to Shavuos and Pekadon? Let's compare it to Retzeach, where it has nothing to do with monetary issues. Says the Gemara, L'chayda oyin the Retzeach, you have a number of oyis. It's not talking about money matters. So the Gemara, Donin oyin sheyesh imohen shvua. It has to be comparable. So we're going to compare a pasuk that has a number of oyis that deal with a vow. The oyin sheyesh imohen shvua. For another case, we have a number of oyis with a vow, like shvuas edus from shvuas pikad. Both deal with vows. But al yechichan, don't throw in here oyin deretzeach. A pasuk about murder, where it says twice the word oy. It has nothing, totally unrelated. She'eni imohen shvua. So the Gemara says, okay, but that's another question. I'll find you another pasuk with a number of oyes, nothing to do with money. For example, oy in the soita, by a soita, it says oy overall of ruchkina, that the husband suddenly has this feeling that he has to warn his wife. Oy isha shetavla or a person that has this, he wants to warn his wife. Both of them talks about oy, and they're not dealing with money matters directly. Shehein oyin. And the Yeshima and Shvur, there's a vow, she has to make a vow that she's innocent. And it's not talking about money. So how do you know to compare Shvur's Edis to Shvur's Pekadon? Let's compare Shvur's Edis to Satan. And therefore that Shvur's Edis should apply even in the case of I'm a Kohen or I'm a Levi. So it says the Gemara, Donin Oyin Sheyesh Imohen Shvur, we'll compare Oyin with has a Shvur. The Ein Imohen Kohen, and there's no Kohen involved. The case of Shvus Bekadon, the Shvus Eidah, we don't need a coin. Two private people. And don't come and throw in here oyin the Retzeach. When it comes to the Retzeach, as you said before, don't do the vow. But don't throw in here oyin the Saita. Don't talk to me about Saita either. Why? You're right that there's a Shvua there, or be Yeshimon Koyin. It's only done together with a Koyin. It's very limited. So it's totally different, unrelated to our case here. Okay, so that is the view of Rabbi Eliezer. Next is Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara, tomorrow's Gemara, is going to go through each one of these tonight a bit more detailed. Rabbi Akiva says, it says by Shavuos Ha'edus, v'hoyer will be, ki yeshem, if you'll be guilty, le'achas to one of these, and we used it before. Abaye used it to tell you that if you swore outside of the bezin, and then you came to the bezin and you denied it, you pay for 5 times you swore outside. You bring a carbon for each one. It says le'achas to each one, but then it says me'elef from these. By saying me'elef from these means not always you're liable. Sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. What it means, sometimes you are, sometimes not. So we're going to learn. If it's a monetary issue, you're liable. If it's a non-monetary issue, you're not liable. Yes, me'elef shuchayiv, yes, me'elef shuchayiv. Okay, so how? Tova moment if there's money involved, chayiv. Tavaracha potter. Anything outside of money, you're not chayiv. Page number 3. Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, Hari Omer. It says in the pasuk that in the pasuk of Shavuos Eidos, it says that if he was asked, they heard, was asked to make a shvua, and he was a witness. Oira, either they saw or yodo they knew. That seems from here that seeing alone, even though they didn't know exactly what happened, is enough. Or knowing alone, even though they didn't see, like circumstantial evidence might be good enough. When is that applied? When do we say that if you just saw, you don't really know what you saw, or if you have, you know what's going on, but you didn't really see, it's good enough? Only by monetary issues. So that's how we know that Shavuos Eidos is talking about money. So anyway, the Eidos it only applies to the where testimony will work. The idea, seeing without knowing, or knowing without seeing. Hakosav medaber. Now the Gemara explains, where do we find by money issues? What's a case? What's an example by money issues? The Eidim saw something, they have no idea what they saw, and yet it's sufficient testimony. Ketzer, what's the case? The case is as follows. If he says, Mona monisi loch b'fnei plenty. I counted $100 bills, let's say, in front of these two people, and I gave them to you. They don't know if I gave it to you as a loan, or I gave it to you for safekeeping, or I gave it to you as a gift. They have no idea. But they saw me standing there on the street corner giving you $100 bills. And this guy says, Baba Mises, let them come over, and let them testify. I know that never happened, Baba Mises. So in other words, he questioned if there were two witnesses that even saw the handover. So if we can find the two witnesses and they come over and said, we don't know it was a loan, we don't know it was a gift, but we did see the handover, then that's it. Then he would have to pay. So here's a case where the witnesses don't really know what happened, why the money was transferred, but nevertheless, it's sufficient to make the guy pay. So that's a case where the witnesses hold back that testimony, they're hurting him. Here's a case where the Eidim saw, but they don't really understand fully what happened there, but that's enough. What's an example of idea b'leidiyah? They have knowledge, but they didn't see. Ketzer, what would that be? It would be a simple case, straightforward. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. That that the money that he admitted to me in front of these, the Reuben says to Shimon, you were made in front of Yankel and Beryl that you owe me $100. You were made in front of them. They never saw you lend me, that I lent you the money, but they heard you say that you admit that you owe me the money. And then you deny it. Shimon denies it. And he said, yeah, you're very plain you do. Let them come. Let them testify. So that's a classical case of Yediyah B'Leidiyah. So the witnesses, they know what happened because you told them, but they didn't see it actually happen. But that's good enough. And therefore, if the Eidim withhold that testimony, they're hurting me. But where do we find cases where Yediyah works without Riyah, Riyah without Yediyah? Only by money matters. That's how I know that Shavuos Eidos is limited only to money matters. Okay. Opinion number 4. Rab Shimon says, I'll tell you how we know. Chayiv kan, Shavuos Eidos Chayiv, and the Chayiv Pekadon. By Pekadon also, if you swore false, you're Chayiv. The difference is by Pekadon, you bring a korban asham, a guilt offering. And by Shavuos Eidos, in the case of the witness, the swearing of the witnesses, or holding back the testimony, you bring a korban chatas oile v'yoyed. You bring a korban chatas, depending on your financial status. So now, said Rav Shimon, let's compare the two. Yechayiv for swearing false by Shavuos Eidos, and Yechayiv by Pekadon, swearing false there. You said, you never gave me the deposit, and then it admitted he lied. Malahal ain't about his moment. They're talking about money matters. So I've kind of aimed about his moment. Number 1. Number 2, he says, that furthermore, I have a kavachayma. Which would you think is stricter, Pekadon or Shavuos Eidos? Ma pekadon. You would think that pekadon is stricter because it's much more far-reaching than Shavuos Ha'edus, and yet pekadon is limited to money matters. So surely Shavuos Ha'edus, which is far more limited, surely should only be limited to money matters. How do we see that pekadon is stricter? Says the Gemara. Ma pekadon, ma pekadon. Also by noshim ka noshim, by pekadon makes no difference who's involved. Whether the men, women, relatives, strangers, psulik of trading, whether they're disqualified to be witnesses and not disqualified, irrelevant. The chayiv and yechayiv, I call achas v'achas. Yechayiv, if he swore 5 times, he never gave me the deposit, and then he admitted that he lied, you got to pay each time. You pay also a penalty of an extra fifth. Got to pay it each time, and makes no difference. Bifnei bezin, shalei bifnei bezin. So it's very strict. And so all encompassing, and yet it's only limited to money matters. Edus, when it comes to Shavuos Edus, right? It only applies to men. It only applies to distant people, not the relatives. It only applies to kosher people for witnesses, not for psulim. If he went and denied in front of Bezin, I don't care how many vows you made outside, I don't have any testimony. You only bring one carbon. So no, there's so much more limited. Surely what? Only to monetary matters. So therefore, that's how I know that Shavuos Ha'edus is limited to monetary matters. Says the Gemara. Rab Shimon himself now questions himself. Interesting. He said maybe my Kal V'Chomer is a bit weak. Ma'ale Pekadon. You know why? Perhaps a Pekadon is different. You know why? Shekain loy asaboy mushba kenishba. In the Torah, by Shavuos Ha'edus, the Torah's cases, the Shama Koilolo is talking about with the Toveya, the plaintiff is asking for a Shavuot. By Shavuos Ha'edus, we have nowhere does the Torah talk about would they volunteer a Shavuot. We know no testimony for you. We don't know. We had to learn it out. Then by Shavuos Pekadon is exactly the opposite. It only talks about where they volunteered or Shavuot say, what are you talking about? We don't know any deposit. We don't know about a case if the other person said, I make you swear, and then they say, oh man, what the din would be there. We don't know. Or they're quiet, what would the din be there? So he said, so Rav Shimon ben Yochai at this stage is of the opinion by Pekadon it only applies if you made the shvuah yourself, not if the other person, made the shvuah for you. Malib or adjured you. Malib Pekadon. Shekain loy asa by mushba kenishba. By Pekadon we don't treat a mushba the same like a nishba. By Pekadon it's only nishba that you're chayiv. But if mushba, if the other person makes it swears on your behalf, and then you have to answer or be quiet or say, I mean, we don't know. By Pekadon, we're going to make a difference between Mezid and Shogeg. Maybe it only applies to Shogeg. By Shavuos Ha'edus, we know it applies to Mezid because the Torah does not say the word Venelim that they forgot. By Pekadon, we say it doesn't apply to me. It only applies at this stage. You might change your mind later. It only applies to Shogeg. So it's actually Pekadon is much weaker. Taimah be'edus, edus is much stronger, and therefore, because edus is much stronger, therefore, maybe it applies not only to monetary issues but to anything. For example, how do you say edus is stronger? She can also by mushba kenishba by edus, by shavuos edus. We don't care who initiated the shvuah; it makes no difference. And umezid keshegig, amazed also brings a cover. So therefore, you're right. Forget that. Talmud Lema. I'm going to have a gzera shavah here. It says, regarding Shavuos Ha'edus, we find the word techta. So the nefesh ketech, the person sinned. And then we find also the exact same expression by Shavuos Pekadon, where it says techta as well. It says nefesh kesechta umol. So therefore, and Shavuos Pekadon. So we use gzera shavah that we compare the two. And just like over there, money issues, money disputes, so too by Shavuos Ha'edus money disputes. We'll just go to the two dots. Says the Gemara, Nema kan techta, Nema, and the Gemara explains. It says here techta, it says over there techta. Mala halan, just like by Pekadon, where it says nefesh kisechta. Eino medaber el b'tviz mama, talking about money issues. I've got here too, medaber el b'tviz mama, talking about money issues. Maskul Rabba Barula, so Rabba Barula asks the question. It says, what about Oi bitu yechichu? It says by Shavuos bitu, right? A Shavuos, you make a promise you'll do something in the future. It says that Oi nefesh kisishba levate lahara Oi lahetiv. There's twice the word Oi over there. So Oi bitu, what's it going to prove? And bitu has nothing to do with money. I'll eat bread. I won't eat bread. Nothing to do with money. Shehain oyin, it has two oyes in it. The yeshima and shvur, there's a vow involved, so it's pretty similar to shvur seidus. The einima and koyin, and there's no koyin there at all. What do you call it? Umedabrim. What we did, okay, we finished with Rab Shimon. Sorry, let me just say, we finished with Rab Shimon. We're going back to the first view that we had. The very first view we had was Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eliezer said that we learn out from the fact that it has oy oy, and we made a Gzer Shava, Shavuos Eidus, and Shavuos Pekudin, both of them have oy oy. So we're asking now a simple question. We find the word, so we asked from Saita, we asked from Ritzeach. Now the Gemara asks us a simple question. We have the same word, oy oy, by Shavuos Bitui. And Shavuos Bitui, there's no koyin involved. Shavuos Bitui is a Shavuos, so it's mamish identical to Shavuos Eidus, and has nothing to do with money. So how do you know Shavuos Eidus has to do with money? Says the Gemara, we'll just go to the two dots here. Let's use the word oy oy from bitui. Same there, Shabbat oy oy. Shehein oyin has two oy's in it. The yeshiman shvur is a vow, very similar to Leidus. The einiman koyin, there's no koyin about. Umedabrim shaloi between mammon, has nothing to do with money matters. You can make any kind of shvur, nothing to do with money. Says the Gemara, it makes more sense. It makes more sense that Shavuos Eidus is similar, is more comparable to a Pekudin than Shavuos Bit. And why is that? She came, first of all, Techte mit Techte, and both of them is starts of Nefesh Kisechte. And therefore, it's very similar, it has the same thing, Nefesh Sin. Says the Gemara, Adirab, if you're looking at words that are similar, look at Bitli. Havel Melech. Why? She came Chatas Mechatas. Both of them bring exactly the same kind of carbon. They both bring this chatas oile v'yared. The Shavuos Bita you bring a chatas oile v'yared, and so too by Shavuos Eidus. And by Pekudin you bring a carbon asham. Very different category. So it makes more sense to learn from Pekudin. Why does it make more sense to learn from Pekudin? Because it makes more sense. Shekain chet for a number of similarities. Because it has the word chet, as we just said. B'mezid, that Pekudin, now we're changing, we're saying about Pekudin also. B'mezid, you are liable because you're going to learn Pekudin from Shavuos. And Tovei v'kafre, in both of the cases, there's somebody demanding and a denial. You know, by Shavuos Eidus, I'm asking you to swear on my behalf and you deny it. By Pekudin, I'm saying, give me back my money I deposited with you and you're denying it. So the circumstances are very, very similar. And v'avre, from the past, I gave you a deposit. Or you saw something that happened yesterday. I want you to testify. It's all about the past. And Bitu, on the other hand, mainly is about the future, even though we learned from Akiva that he also includes the past, but primarily, it's about the future. Says the Gemara, Adrab Bitu Lamed, Mishul Bitu. Shekain Chatas, they have other similarities. The word Sechta. Shiyoda, they both have the same kind of a carbon, the carbon Oile V'Yored by Shavuos Eidus, Shavuos Bitu. And L'chaimish, that by Pekudin you pay an extra penalty of a fifth. You don't have that in these other two places. So we answer, you're right, the three similarities, but Hanach Nefishon, more similarities to Pekudin than to Bitu. And that's how we compare Shavuos Eidus to Shavuos Pekudin, and therefore we know it's limited only to money matters. Okay, have a good walk, everybody.